I'm Oliver Bruce, dyslexic and dyspraxic serial entrepreneur with little more than one GCSE, but none of that matters. And that is exactly why I started this podcast. I've built multi-million pound businesses from just an idea, and I've gone into markets that I've got no right to be in. It's not always plain sailing, and what you see on social media is often a fraction of the reality. I somehow wanted to tell the candid truth, the story around startup and scale-up life, and just how important mental agility and strength is in this largely idealistic and fake world. I hope you enjoy my podcast and can take some solace and some learnings from the unspoken reality and subjectivity of the term success. This is Success is in the Mind, and thank you so much for watching.
I think it's dangerous for lots of people to go on these podcasts and say, just go with your gut, just get on with it. Oh, you don't need university. I think that all that stuff is nonsense, to be honest. I mean, we opened next door to a Starbucks. People thought we were insane.
I mean, that is mad.
Yeah. We're so guilty of never stopping and celebrating success. We only seem to talk about and celebrate the Elon Musks. And I'm like,
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
And literally, in that moment, it was over for me.
Yeah. So, have your coffee and welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
This is all about you and grinds, but I want to dial it back a bit and speak about your dad, because your dad, like you, was an entrepreneur. He had an Italian garment business. He had it on the high street. He was a stall trader, opened up a high street store, flipped it into a phone shop, and then you kind of took the phone shop on in time. Did you learn a lot from your dad back in the day?
Yeah, I learned a huge amount from my dad. I always say that I had a really nice balance between my mum and my dad, because my dad was just straight out entrepreneur. He didn't play by the rules. He taught me to kind of, I wouldn't say ignore the rules, but be selective about which rules you follow and which rules you don't, and to kind of be, I guess, to be slightly unconventional. Whereas my mum was kind of a bit more sensible, that maybe he lacked sometimes. And, I think my mum kept the wheels on for us as a family quite a lot. His stuff would either, I get the impression that his stuff would either be very successful or not at all successful in kind of drips and drabs. And my mum always worked and had a successful career as well. And I think I got a nice bit of stability between them. But for sure, growing up watching him was very much, I would say, the primary reason I became, I decided to do stuff on my own.
Because you say that some of the things that he did weren't successful. Obviously, the Italian fashion business, pretty successful. The phone business, seemingly quite successful. He kind of rode that wave of the revolution in the phone world. What else did he do that didn't really work?
Look, I wouldn't necessarily say stuff that he didn't work. He started with clothes, importing fashion from Italy and selling them on Roman roads. So, back in the 70s or whenever it was, the world was very, very different. And if you wanted the latest Italian fashion, well, someone has to go to Italy and put it in a van and drive it back, basically. There's no international chains, there's obviously no e-commerce. So I think everything he did was successful, but I think, he was so bright, so smart, saw so far ahead, was always such an early adopter on everything. I remember him pulling out the first iPod before I'd even heard of one.
Really?
He could always see where the world was going, and yet, he achieved success, but he didn't achieve gigantic success from a financial perspective. And I think that was just maybe lacking a little bit of I don't think he wanted to work that hard, to be completely honest. But I think that's great as well. I don't think everyone needs to say, I need to work as hard as possible and do everything and only focus on making as much money as possible. He saw his businesses as a tool to enable him to have the lifestyle he wanted, pursuing lots of other interests.
So in terms of defining success, it's quite a subjective term. And you said that your dad isn't successful, but yet he had the freedom to kind of do what he wanted to do and not, if he didn't want to have to work as hard as he should have done, work as hard as he did. What would you say in terms of success to you is then?
Look, I think if you create an organization and there are people who are solo entrepreneurs, writers, or people who have, one-man businesses or one woman businesses that are websites or service providers. And I think for them, they get to really curate their own version of success. Because if you're an author and you know, one hit book a decade might be success, and then you spend the rest of the decade doing whatever you please. But I think if you create an organization and it employs lots of people and it has lots of customers, then I think probably the breadth of the definition of success narrows a little bit. And I think, you know, I think it has to be successful for everyone that's involved. You know, it needs to work for the shareholders and the investors, because otherwise there's no point carrying on. It needs to work for the staff, because you're unlikely to have a very successful organization if you've not got happy staff. And it needs to work for the customers, because if it doesn't work for the customers, then the music stops. So I think increasingly it becomes about trying to make all of these stakeholders happy, and maybe your own version of what success looked like becomes slightly less relevant, to be honest.
Because you worked for your dad's phone shop, essentially. You kind of went in and helped him out there. Did you learn all this kind of mentality around keeping staff happy, making sure that shareholders, or at least your dad, was pleased, etc., and the cash was coming in? Because you can't have just gone straight into business, and you did stuff before that, obviously, but you can't go straight into it knowing everything. You're quite rounded now, but what did you know back then?
I think I learned how to sell a little bit, which I think is, no matter what you do, you have to be able to sell in some form or another. Whether, you know, I don't sell coffee directly, but we sell coffee as an organization, and you have to sell your idea to landlord. Even if you don't have investors, you have to, if you want to do a physical rollout, you have to sell your ideas to landlords, you have to sell your ideas to banks, you have to sell your ideas to investors. So I think I learned, you know, how to do that. And I think, you know, talking to a small business and getting them to buy 20 or 30 Nokia 8210s or whatever they were at the time, you know, it was amazing grounding. And I could do it on the phone as well, so no one realized I was 13 or whatever I was at the time. But yeah, look, I think exposure to small business is amazing, and I think you learn more from doing than you ever will from you know, and I don't mean this in an anti-education way. You know, I'm super pro-education. Education is amazing, but like the realities of, you know, firstly, you need a great education to have the brain power to be able to learn things and understand things and assimilate knowledge. But then you need to go have experience, because you do learn more about business through doing than learning about it, for sure.
And in terms of, I suppose, what your dad broke in terms of rules, etc. Obviously, going through education, you were pretty straight and narrow. You went through university, did an internship. You know, you did the path that most people would do to go and get a job in the corporate sector, right? Yeah. Your dad bending the rules, etc. How much did that play on you wanting to go, actually, this isn't for me, I'm going to do this, tick the box, and then bugger off and do something else?
Yeah, I think it really did a lot, actually. You know, I went to a really good school, and the only thing that was discussed at school, and actually I always say I need to go back to the school and talk to them and you know, try and get involved somehow. I've done that a little bit with UCL, actually. So I went to UCL and studied economics, and I've helped them out a little bit with their entrepreneurship stuff. And I think, like, when I was at school, the only thing that was discussed was which of these 5 to 10 red brick universities are you going to? Which of these 5 to 10 subjects are you going to do? And after that, which of these 5 to 10 very conventional careers are you going to do? You know, you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a management consultant, or a banker, or something like that. And that was it. And I don't think it was, you know, I don't think they meant it in a bad way. They meant it because this is what success looks like. But it was never discussed that you could go, like, build something, and it could be so much more fun than those things, and so much more interesting. And I think that's a shame. But I do think the world's moved on a lot in terms of our general awareness now and excitement about entrepreneurship and getting your own business. I think the problem now is that we only seem to talk about and celebrate the Elon Musks and the smash hit $1 billion IPOs. And we should talk much more about the 1 million, 2 million, 5 million turnover businesses out there that employ 10, 20, 50, 100 people and actually are amazing. And we don't talk about those enough.
No, and I think there is a massive shift in the world of entrepreneurialism, as you say, in terms of people are becoming more accepting of failure, which actually in America has always been there. People have always been like, go on, give it a go. If you cock it up, doesn't really matter, we'll move on. In America, in the UK, much, much less so. But I think that's becoming far more accepted now. But in terms of the VC-backed businesses, you've obviously gone into businesses that have PE or have VC backing. And again, you've done some funding recently for Grind, of which one of those initially has helped you raise cash. How important is it to raise money when starting a business?
I think raising money is inevitably part of the story for nearly all businesses. Again, if we discount the solo entrepreneur, we discount authors, stuff like that. You know, if you want to build anything, it's pretty hard to build something and never raise money. People do it, and there are these people out there that own 100% of their business that they've self-funded from day one, and that's amazing. Often, if you dig a little bit deeper, there might be a cheeky loan from the bank of mum and dad, or a friend and family, or my uncle lent me 500 grand to start it up. But some people do it for sure. I think the reality is, if you want to accelerate, if you want to start a business, it often needs capital. Although one of the amazing things about 2022 is the world that we live in today, you can start a business arguably for less money, faster, easier, and more cheaply than ever before, which is amazing. But, typically you will eventually need to raise money in some form or another. And, people are very into this sphere of raising money. They want to know how you do it, how you get investors. And, happy to talk about it, obviously, but the answer is there's a lot of answers to that question, and it's a complex area. But it can be the difference between make and break, and I think it certainly has been for us.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of accepting failure for you guys, because obviously going out and raising money, you have a lot of doors closed on you.
Yeah.
Equally, starting a business organically and not raising the cash, you might have a door closed on you, and that is the business, right? Yeah. At what point did you go, okay, great, I'm gonna raise the money? Because I know you were working essentially in another business at the time when you started. When you started Grind, the business was called InterResolve, which was a car. Broker,
it's basically kind of in the world of the connected car. Yeah.
And is that still around now?
Yeah, it is. So that's still run by my best mate from school, who's still kind of my best. Well, he's still my best mate.
Kind of your best mate.
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, look, I think, so that was a business that we fell into while still at uni because of a personal connection of someone that invested in it. When it was kind of a very nascent idea, we became a founding team of 4.
Right.
We went off and raised venture capital. Literally as 4 people with an idea, we raised, I think, 7 or 8 million from Boardroom Capital, one of Europe's leading tech VC firms. And then while still at uni, I would go to UCL 2-3 hours a week in my 3rd year, but then do a full-time job the rest of the time. And, again, I was like 22, 23 or something, and sat at a boardroom table at Balderton pitching for money. I mean, I was like, this is insane.
Did it help that you had that background in economics at UCL, where you understood finance, you understood numbers, and you understood, to a certain extent, business because of your dad? You could sit there with a lot more gravitas than, say, your mate who hadn't had that.
I don't necessarily think, to be honest, that the degree was that helpful in that. Economics is an amazing degree, but it's nothing to do with real world business, right? It's to do with all the stuff we see in the press now, monetary policy and inflation and fiscal policy. I think definitely the experience of just growing up with. I feel very lucky to have grown up in a house where the attitude was, you can just do it, just get on with it, just see what happens, just try, just don't be afraid to fail, and you don't need to be so conventional. And and I watched my dad, while everyone else's dads kind of seemingly went off and had these stressful jobs, I watched my dad drive around in his classic cars from meeting to meeting. I just always thought, what a nice way to have your business life, where you get to set your own hours. If you want to stay home and take the kids to the park, you can. If you want to go here, you can. And it doesn't necessarily mean about not working hard, but it means just about being the master of your own destiny. And I think that attitude, it was probably pretty fundamental.
And you've always been the master of your own destiny, in as much as you say you fell into InterResolve whilst at university. When you were at InterResolve, you still had Grind as an idea, but you kind of hedged on it and you said, I'll stay in the business, build Grind, and then I'll jump ship when Grind's actually got something that is workable, essentially. So you've kind of controlled, fairly risk averse, I suppose, in that sense. But when you got into Grind, what did you do to really gear that up that you'd learned over the last couple of years?
Yeah, look, I think there's actually a brief chapter in there, which was I went and did an internship at an investment bank, and I remember distinctly being there and hating it so much.
Too corporate.
Just hating it. And I was 8 weeks in, the internshipy stuff had finished, and it was more just you get given an admin job, basically. I don't think it was the best internship program in the world. And I remember distinctly being asked to do this manual job on a spreadsheet and writing some formulas to speed it up. And I am not by any means an Excel whiz. This was I watched my the guys in my finance team building these 20-page models. I'm like, this is unbelievable. You know, this was basic stuff.
Yeah.
And I came up with this, and I went and I remember some version of that going to show like my line manager at the time, and basically being told, no, we don't want the spreadsheet built like that. Like, we want it to be manual. And I'm like,
Why?
Yeah. And they're like, just because, I don't know, because Dawn says it has to be like that or something.
He's been here for 40
and
years.
literally, like in that moment, it was over for me. Like in that one, I don't remember a lot of individual moments, but I remember that one moment, and I was like, I can't be in this world. I really can't be in this world. So fast forward to 2010, and actually, it was kind of necessity that kicked off Grind, because unfortunately my dad passed away when I was 25, and that necessitated some action, if you like, in that I inherited this mobile phone business, which by that point was, I think it was break even / loss making, hard to tell. Right. He'd been sick for a few years, obviously I hadn't cared less about the business and was focusing on getting better. So the business had kind of been in decline. Plus, you had the shift towards the iPhone, where everyone just wants the phone in a box, and it becomes, it's no longer. It started off installing something that in today's money would cost £5,000 into the back of your car to a relatively commoditized thing where everyone just wants it for the cheapest price. So the business had been had been coming off anyway, but I loved that little building on Old Street Roundabout. So for people who are not in London or super familiar with London, there's a roundabout called Old Street Roundabout in East London, just near the city. It's became, as you know, teeth need to suck eggs, but it's become known as Silicon Roundabout. Businesses like TransferWise and those kind of businesses, loads of tech businesses were literally born on top of that roundabout, sometimes in Shoreditch Grind in the early days. And this became really the hub of East London. And even though we made the decision to create Shoreditch Grind before that, you could see it coming, right? 2012, the Olympics was coming, that was in Stratford, the centre of London was kind of gravitating east. And I love that little spot, that little round building.
It is a wicked building. I mean, and it's still there today, obviously, in terms of it looks awesome, and it's very iconic. In fact, I was there only a few months ago. I remember it really well. It's a great building.
No, it was an amazing building, and it was my dad's building. He didn't have the freehold, but he had a very long lease. That we've since extended into an even longer lease.
999.
But I wish it was 999, but it's not far off.
Far off.
But and I just it never for a second occurred to me that we would give this building back, or we would not do something with it. And obviously that kicked off the whole Grind project.
But in terms of actually going into it, then obviously the guys that you're working with into Resolve, how did they feel when you said, "Boys, I'm out. I can't do this anymore"? But surely that was a bit of a stab in the back to you, mate.
No, do you know what? It wasn't like that actually, because I did both for about 2 years, or certainly for 18 months. So. I kind of set it up I set Grind up as a side project essentially, and I would go before going to work and after work, and sometimes I would nip there during lunch, and it wasn't until, look, I think, it was a hedge. A hedge is a great term, because I didn't leave into Resolve until I had financing lined up to do stores 2, 3 and 4.
So you were looking that far ahead. It wasn't just a nail store one. It was going down.
No, 3, 4, 5 stores. So I arranged our first external investment while still working at the other business, and then as part of the package, I agreed to leave and go full time to focus on the rollout from 1 stores to 4 stores, because looking after 1 store was not enough to keep me busy enough that I would have just done that. So it was all about, okay, well, 1 store's successful, we're going to roll out, I'll leave and join. Fortunately, the timing worked quite well for the other business, because that business is still going now, but it shrunk and changed and swung directions a million times, as these things often do. And at the time, we had too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And there was too many people sat there on chunky salaries, and like, it was a bit like looking around the table, and you come to the realization that we're just top heavy. And I was like, look, guys, I think I'm going to make this easy. I've got this other thing going. I'm really enjoying it. I'm going to go do that for a bit.
Right. Okay. In terms of that, then, did you have a buyout from Into Resolve, or was it very much, boys, you take it, you run with it, I'm done?
Yeah. No. Look, I mean, I kept some equity, but no, there was no buyout. I mean, back then it was still about funding the business to keep it alive, as it so often is. So no, there was no there wasn't a massive queue of buyers for those shares at the time.
And you say it was sort of through necessity because your dad passed away, and I'm sorry to hear that. But in terms of actually how you went, okay, Dad, I can see this coming, because obviously it must have been a 3 or 4 year period. You said that he wasn't focused on the business for a while, and then it suddenly happened. How did you go, right, I'm going to change this phone shop into a coffee shop? Or did you have to keep nurturing along with that phone shop? Or what was the process there?
No, it's weird because those times, that was without doubt the worst period of my life ever. And you almost, I think, start running slightly on autopilot because you're so kind of obviously preoccupied with what's happened. And I can't even remember the point at which I pressed the go button. Do you know what I mean? Like, there must have been a point, but I remember talking to the staff and saying, like, look, I'm sorry, but we're going to move the remaining parts of the business online, sell off this part of the business, and the store is going to cease trading. But to be honest, I think you got to remember it was a small family business, and the staff were devastated as well about what had happened. And it wasn't a big organisation. There was probably 4 or 5 members of staff. Right. But they knew what was happening. And so so step 1 is close down. Step 2 is speak to the landlord and explain what's happening. And then step 3 was we'll decide what we're going to do with the building. And meantime, we were still paying the rent every quarter, which was a not insignificant amount of money. And certainly, I didn't have huge amounts of money then. So that was a good motivating factor to get on with it and crack on. And then it became rip out the store, refit the store, put the pieces together, and then get it back open. I think it took it was about 13 months or so between my dad passing away and the doors reopening. Wow. So I think, that was obviously a long time. We would never dream of sitting on a store for 13 months now, but considering it was the first one, I think it wasn't too bad.
And considering it was the first one, when opening it or when building out the concept or the value prop or the business plan, did you have in place that actually was just a complete, like, a farcical idea that just didn't work?
Well, I mean, when I decided, okay, this is definitely going to be a coffee shop. It's definitely going to be a kind of a cool, independent style coffee shop. I knew I needed some money, more money than I had, and I knew I needed someone who really got it. And I had a friend, or I have a friend still. He's still part of the business today. A guy called Kaz. He was in the Body Rockers. He had the song "I Like the Way You Move."
That's Kaz James.
Correct. Yeah. So he had this massive smash hit record.
His song, I Like the Way You Move.
Really? Massive record. But I met him just before that, actually. He signed with Universal. He's Australian from Melbourne. He signed with Universal Records, came over to London, and my best friend from growing up his dad owned the Cross, a kind of legendary nightclub in King's Cross. It's now obviously all been redeveloped, but back in the day it was like the Ibiza nightclub, properly legendary. It was there for 20 years or something. Anyway, we would obviously always be there because luckily my best mate's dad owned the best club in London, so we were there all the time when we were 18 or 19 or whatever. And so I don't know, this was pre-Facebook almost. This was pre all of that stuff, but for whatever reason, one of our group of friends knew one of Kaz's group of friends, and they kind of said, look, when you get to London, come to the Cross, come to the the kitchen out the back, which was like the VIP thing, and you probably like these guys. Anyway, so we all met and became friends. We've been friends ever since. And because Kaz was from Melbourne, he really missed the Melbourne coffee scene, and he just didn't get it. He was like, I don't understand. London is amazing. Like London, I absolutely love London, but I just don't get this coffee thing. I was like, and I actually remember we'd go out for dinner and Kaz would constantly moan about the coffee. And somewhere in the back of my mind, it was like, okay, if I'm going to do a coffee shop, I think I should get Kaz involved. And he's like very creative, had some money to put in because he made a lot of money at the record. So then we started, and I think an idea that didn't work, I wouldn't say it didn't work, but we put a recording studio upstairs. So that, obviously this was Kaz's idea. He wanted to hang out there and have a recording studio. And look, I don't regret for a second putting a recording studio upstairs. It's been really cool. We've had amazing, famous artists come and write records in there. It's been such a great part of the culture. It never worked as a business in terms of like renting it out, because the reality is you just end up lending it to your mates.
It's a good PR stunt.
But it's a great PR stunt, But I mean, look, I think we made so many mistakes, like just countless mistakes. We had no idea about the licenses you needed, the permissions you needed. We had no idea about the health and safety stuff you had to put in place. But I think what's great, don't worry, nothing was ever too bad, but you know, there's a lot of I's and T's you have to cross with different color chopping boards and you know, all this stuff, which is obviously designed to be there and protect people. You have to learn that stuff fast in your first kind of couple of months of operation. But what's nice when you start up is people are very, very helpful. People are way more helpful to one-man band brand new businesses than they are to 10, 20, 50 site, 50 location organizations, because they kind of are willing to let you learn a bit at the start. But once you've been going for a while, they're like, no, you should know better, which is fair enough.
That is fair. And do you think if you raise money, they perceive you slightly differently? If you go, right, I've done a £2 million fund, you should now know what you're doing. Yeah,
for sure. And people don't read anything. They just read the headline. You know, they read, oh, Grind's done this raise, and they think I got that money or something, or they think
you're the richest person in the room.
And you know, it's like people don't even go into the details. But as soon as someone sees some headline like that, they're like, oh my God, these guys must be able to afford everything. They must be, you know, it's just not the reality. As anyone in business knows. But look, I think we made a lot of mistakes at the start, and we continue to make mistakes today.
And I mean, in terms of, there's a level of irony from the transition from the phone shop when your dad obviously had it was turning into a commodity, to going into coffee, which fundamentally is a commodity, right?
I mean, we opened next door to a Starbucks. People thought we were insane.
I mean, that is mad. That is mad. But you were a bar as well as a coffee shop, as well as a live music venue. As you were a place to go to entertain people, which Starbucks wasn't. You know, that must have had a massive impact on the retention of people coming back.
Yeah, look, and I think, you know, it's all just been evolution, which I think is a really nice thing about Grind, and probably like one of my favorite parts about the story is how it's organically evolved from thing to thing to thing. And you know, V0.1 of Grind, it was because it was still in beta then, right? Like it wasn't even ready to be publicly released. Was literally just coffee, sandwiches, croissants. That was it.
So the basic coffee shop.
Basic coffee shop. And it was, you know, the ingredients on day one that made it a success were an amazing team who we encouraged to have loads of fun, turn the music up, dance around, let's make this fun. Because at the time you had a choice, right? You could go to Starbucks, Costa, wherever, and get what they do, and we all know what they do, or you could seek out these independent places, often run by a Kiwi or someone from Australia or something like that. And they were, you know, the quality of the products was great. But the problem, not with all of them, but with a lot of them, was they'd be tucked down a side street. Like, you know, they'd never be prime. You had to know where they were. There wasn't a sign. When you went inside, it looked like they'd spent about 50 quid fitting it out, and it was kind of falling apart. And it would take 20 minutes to get in and out and get a coffee. The card machine's always broken. The person serving you perhaps might ask you too many questions about, do you want the Guatemalan or the Mexican or the Ethiopian? I just want coffee. But I just want a coffee. And to be honest, like, I'm now 15 minutes late for a meeting because the whole process has taken 20 minutes.
I can't read your chalkboards and it's really irritating.
Exactly. And where's the loyalty scheme? Why is there no bathroom? Why is it so dirty in here? Like, where's the hygiene? Like, you know, like they weren't necessarily excelling at those things, but the product was great. So from day one, it was about, well, can we take all the things that are great about a Starbucks or i.e., you know, the card machine does work and there's no minimum spend, and we do take American Express and all these other things that like you take for granted now, but in 2011
the one's really interesting though, because there's so many independent coffee shops there, and it's just a complete bind.
I'm like, we will take money in any form you want to give it to us, pretty much. You know, and there'll be a loyalty scheme, and you'll get in and out, and the products will be consistent, and the place will be clean. Can we map that with the high quality product, and then make it fun and make it accessible, not make it like this coffee education experience? Like, actually, maybe I just want a great flat white and I don't want to talk about it that much.
Speed and excellence.
Yeah, exactly. So that was that. Listen, there was no business plan. It was like properly, like we were just making it up.
Even when you went for the cash, there must have been
no, because we funded the first one privately.
And then you did a crowdfund, right?
No, then we did some angel stuff to go from 1 to 4, and then we started doing crowd stuff after 4 sites. Right. So by then there was, but site 1 was our own money. We were literally just making it up. And I mean, at one point we built a bar and then tore it down because we realized it was just didn't work. So, you know, we built we had someone build a bar, and we realized it was all in the wrong place and it was all back to front, and we like tore it down. And that's just kind of part of it. But look, I think that was kind of the fundamental idea. And then it was this idea of, we want to have our own coffee made for us. And obviously today we're sat in our coffee roastery, which is you can't see much of it behind us, but it's,
we're going downstairs in a bit.
Through that wall, there's a big old, pretty serious coffee roasting operation. We didn't have that back then, but we found someone who would roast to our specifications and put it in a bag with the brand of the first store, which was Shoreditch Grind, before we later became Grind, because I didn't want to be promoting someone else's business, and I think it was interesting because you look back on some of the little decisions you made that turned out to be massive decisions without you even knowing it. But like, we literally had people knocking on the door going, "Hi, we're from X coffee roasters, we'll give you a free machine, free training, you can come to our place around the corner, we'll help you out, we'll help you with cups and milks, and we'll sort out the whole supply chain for you, take away a lot of pain and a lot of money if you agree to use our coffee and put it on the shelves." Because they obviously see this as an advertising opportunity as well as getting the contract. And we were like, I'm not interested in building someone else's brand. Even from day one, that for some reason that was instinctive, and obviously that was very important.
You wouldn't
down
be
the road
here if you didn't do.
No, I don't think so. No,
well, you'd have just become another commoditized coffee shop on the corner of a high street.
Yeah, exactly. So I think sometimes the big decisions, you have no idea you're even they are at the moment of making them. You don't realize they're big decisions, but later turns out they were.
Do you look back on that and you go, okay, Cross, I'm going to consolidate what's happened. I'm going to take some time out, albeit you just had a kid, so you can't take any time out now. But back in the day, and you kind of went, actually, take stock. That's good. I've done well. I'm happy with where I've got to. Or do you go next, and never have time to sit down and kind of reflect?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the latter. I think we're so guilty of never stopping and celebrating success. And the nature of these things, I don't know, we say it every time we're doing a fundraise or we've got some big moment coming up, we say, right, this time we never stop and celebrate. This time we're really going to stop and celebrate. And we say it, and we never do it properly. And I think that's partly because everything takes so long. By the time it actually happens, you're bored of it. Like, people imagine this moment of, we did a big fundraise last year. Everyone took some secondaries. Everyone sold some shares for the first time. I sold some shares for the first time since I started it for 10 years. It was a big milestone moment, especially off the pandemic pivot, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But still, I think like these things, everyone imagines you're all sat in a boardroom and then you open a bottle of champagne and everyone goes. It's just not like that. Like, the reality is, it completes when someone finally clicks sign on a DocuSign somewhere, and then someone in a bank moves some money around, and then. But there's never a moment of completion necessarily. It's like drips on, and by this point, you spent so much time with lawyers. You've spent so much time talking about it. It's relief. But when it actually gets to the point of being contracted, whatever that thing is, you just want to go to bed, and just go sit in the garden quietly and or by your own, and not talk by yourself and not talk to anyone. But look, I think I'm going to try in the next 10 years. I'm going to try and celebrate success more.
Before we get back to the podcast, I wanted to ask you, are you a high-growth startup or an ambitious entrepreneur? Our headline sponsors, Capsule Cover, are the perfect insurance specialists if you are geared for high growth. Here at Pinpoint Media, we use Capsule Cover for all our insurance. So if you're an ambitious, high-growth startup, why not reach out to them via capsulecover.com. Coming up in this episode.
So how are you going to cut through that noise? Like, why are you different? You see lots of these D2C businesses grew big online businesses, then opened physical. We've kind of done it the other way around, in that we opened the physical, but we are now primarily a coffee at home business.
That is all to come in this episode of Successes in the Mind.
But in terms of actually coming up with those ideas and pushing it forwards, it was you and your business partner at the time when you founded it. Now, is it a team of people that come up with the ideas? Is it yourself that come up with the ideas? Because, and you alluded to the pandemic pivot, and you did amazingly. It took you 10 years to make 10 million quid roughly revenue from Grind, from the restaurants, and then in the pandemic, 10 months to make another 10 million quid by doing home delivery, which makes absolute sense. Was that your idea?
Look, I think we're a big organisation now. I think we've got 250, 300 staff across the different bits. And ideas come from everywhere. I think we and particularly the kind of the smaller, the really good but smaller ideas, and the innovation, the day-to-day innovation definitely comes from the teams in the business, because they're the experts in what they do, and they're closest to it, and they're doing it every day. So the guy that runs the roastery here is constantly innovating. He's constantly gone to Germany to meet some new home compostable packaging supplier that can do a material that's better for coffee freshness and better for this, and we don't need this, and we got this new box, this new packaging. Like, they're constantly doing amazing work on innovating. I think the story about the pandemic pivot, look, I think that was in a big way me personally, but for sure influenced by my team, by my finance director, by my now CMO. But I think it was as much as anything, it was a reaction to what we were seeing. So this was 2019, and by this point, I think we were at, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 million of run rate revenue, something like that. I think we had 10 or 11 stores, something like that. We had a franchise agreement to roll out in airports and train stations signed. We had 2 or 3 stores under contract. We had partnership stuff, and we were a pretty well-known brand. We had hundreds of thousands of social media followers. We're a pretty well-known brand. We'd already done two rounds of crowdfunding successfully, and we were gearing up to do our third one. And we really did that third one because if you want to raise money under EIS, which is a big tax incentive for individual investors, you can't do it when you've got more than 250 full-time equivalent employees. So you might have 300 people, but effectively that's like 250 full-time people. And we realized we were right up against that limit. And so we realized we had the opportunity to do one last round under EIS before we kept growing and our headcount burst through it. So we decided it made sense to do that because EIS is such an amazing incentive. And
that's where they get basically 70% offset against tax. So they
you get an immediate, so if you invest £10,000, you get £3,000 off your tax bill next January, and then any gain in the future is tax-free. And if the business eventually doesn't work, you write it off against future tax bills. So it's very, very,
really risk averse.
Very, very advantageous, and makes it much more palatable to invest in risky small businesses as an individual. So we decided to do one last round anyway, and this was kind of the summer of 2019. And as I said, we had lots of stores, we had lots of staff. All of our stores were going really well. Everything was great, and we were building these plans, and it wasn't. I think just based on what we were seeing, it just felt like it was getting squeezed. And this was the casual dining crunch was going on, and those lots of big restaurant chains were either going completely bust, if you remember, or were massively cutting sites because it was getting harder and harder. Rent was going up, rates were going up, the amount you paid staff was going up. The input costs of everything was going up. Not like it is now, but it was still, it was going up. And you felt like every time you did a new one of these stores, you'd go and spend £1 million, £1.5 million fitting it out. It was a relatively big bet. It needed to take 50 grand a week or whatever it needs to take for it to really make sense. And how many times can you do that before you get one really wrong? And we did get one really wrong, actually. And it's like, but at the same time, we've got this brand and people love this brand. And I would meet people and they would say to me, I love Grind, I love the brand, I love this person in this store. And I knew, obviously, people are always nice when they find out it's yours, but I felt like I really believed, and I still do believe, that people actually love the brand and what we stand for. And so there has to be another way to leverage this without just constantly adding more and more stores and all the risk and difficulties that entails. So it was quite a strategic move, I think, to go into developing coffee products to sell at home. And I think I had this other thing, which was I didn't make coffee at home.
Right.
Which was really weird for someone who owned a coffee business and a coffee roastery, because I honestly just couldn't be bothered with all the faff and the mess. And occasionally I would do it, and I had various home espresso machines and this, but it just kind of end up with coffee everywhere, coffee beans on the floor. I was like, I can't bother with this, but I think always thought that, Nespresso was such an amazing system in terms of the energy in to output out, put it in, press a button. It's pretty much like ordering it on your phone and it appearing in the kitchen.
As good as.
Which is what we want as as modern day customers. But the problem was that, first of all, the coffee didn't taste very good, in my opinion. And secondly, this environmental thing was just, terrible. And you're getting this thing and you're putting it in the bin. It's like, this is rubbish. But then we discovered we could do compostable pods. And after that discovery, it was like, right, okay, I think this really makes sense. And I think I'd always followed, I didn't read hospitality magazines. I read TechCrunch and Sunday Times Business and
I love
FT.
TechCrunch.
I used to read TechCrunch every day back then. And, I'd seen Dollar Shave Club and all these other things. I think, Dollar Shave Club inspired a whole generation of businesses, I think. But, it suddenly occurred to me, I was like, hold on. Like, we could do coffee pods in the post through the letterbox.
Yeah.
They don't need to be refrigerated. They've got a long shelf life. They fit through the letterbox. And probably if you use one coffee pod a day, you're going to use one coffee pod tomorrow and the day after and the day after. If you use 3, you're going to use 3 tomorrow and the 3. So like perfect for subscription because the frequency on which you order and reorder is relatively consistent. Like the cadence is very consistent, right? So like for all of these reasons, this feels like a really good subscription product. And I think I was already at that point subscribed to like laundry capsules through the post and a few other things like that. And really, I think this whole thing here started, and I've got like a 5 or 6 page little memo that I wrote for our board and our investors back in 2019 that some of the team helped with, outlining that we should instead of doing £1 million into yet another physical store, we should spend £1 million on a bet into direct to consumer. And that involved, actually wasn't this place, it was about 2 miles away because we moved into that roastery, which was very big at the time, but a fraction of the size of this. We ended up outgrowing it in like 9 months and having to move again because of what happened with the pandemic. But it was, let's move roastery, let's buy some big pieces of machinery that we really need for the manufacturing, some of which were £250,000 each. Let's build a Shopify website, let's put a budget into place for Facebook and Instagram advertising.
Well, I was going to say that's what I first came across you guys properly was exactly at that point in the pandemic when you basically attacked my Instagram feed.
Yeah.
And it was great stuff. It was really good stuff. But the D2C world has become bigger and bigger over the last couple of months and years.
Yeah.
You got it again at the exact right time.
Yeah, I think we certainly had a really great year from the start of the pandemic to kind of April 2021. I think the world of D2C is changing a lot. But certainly for that period, and I think if you go back to 2019, I think the rationale of let's do D2C was really, really sound. And I'm obviously unbelievably grateful that we took that decision, and I'm grateful that my investors and board backed what was arguably quite a risky decision at the time. Yeah. But I think, the pandemic obviously had the benefit of massively accelerating it and making it really look like a good decision. Was it a good decision in isolation? I don't know. Was it a good decision if you somehow magically have a crystal ball and know that a pandemic's coming? Yes, it was the best decision ever. So, sometimes life conspires to make you look good and sometimes life conspires to make you look bad. And in that situation, obviously very glad we did it. But yeah, look, I think that D2C world was amazing then. And I'm really glad we had it. It has become much more difficult in the last year. I think there was a kind of probably a golden decade of D2C, which ended last summer, really, with the iOS and Facebook changes.
Because you can't retarget as aggressively as you used to be able to. But arguably, people are still, because it's got such a low barrier to entry for D2C, because frankly, you can sell something and then make it. Yeah. Ironically, the barrier to entry for your world is quite high. You're talking about, the $1 million, $1.5 million you've got to put into a restaurant, for instance. There are so many people that try and go into F&B businesses because they think it's easy to do, and it goes Pete Tong. Yeah. What would you say to them in terms of when investing or building or growing an F&B brand? Yeah. It ain't just, okay, I'm going to sell some sweets to somebody. Yeah. A lot harder than that. What would you do?
Yeah, F&B is really hard. It's everyone thinks they'd be great at running a bar and a restaurant because they know what people want.
They like drinking.
And they like drinking and they like eating. And the reality is, it's a lot harder than that. And the failure rate for starting any business is pretty high. The failure rate on F&B is about as high as it gets, I believe. Look, I think like everything, are you solving a genuine need? Are you doing something that people want, that people are interested in? no one cares. Like I always like to remind people, no one cares about you or what you're doing. Like, because there's so much noise in the world. Like, so how are you going to cut through that noise? Like, why are you different? And you don't have to invent, some amazing new technology to have success in business. It can just be an iteration on what everyone else was doing before. In fact,
look at Branson.
Most businesses are. Exactly. Yeah. He hasn't
nothing
invented,
new there.
Yeah.
Cruise ships have been around a while.
Yeah.
Just lanes.
But just his take, right?
Yeah.
Just a new version
Slightly
of it. Exactly. Yeah. And taking the good bits and then repackaging it for the desires of the current customer base, rather than repeating what everyone else has always done. Yeah. Great example would be rolling together business class and first class, right? Like, what was the point of?
Well, Virgin Atlantic, we should say, are brilliant.
Yes, exactly. Well, absolutely. I'm saying, I think it was the idea at the time of rolling together business class and first class into just upper class was quite revolutionary, but made so much sense.
Have you seen the new tables now where you can have like a group of people on a plane? So you've got a table. Genius.
Yeah,
but so
amazing.
simple.
Yeah, so simple. Yeah.
It changed everything.
Yeah.
Changed everything. But in terms of, and that's just iteration granted, but in terms of investing in a business, SaaS businesses, everybody's getting money for SaaS businesses, even if they're not going to necessarily work.
Yeah.
But again, people base themselves on what they see on LinkedIn. How do you sort of manage your mental well-being when actually looking at people online going, yeah, that's fine, you're doing really well, but actually I'm doing this? Where do you metric yourself? How do you keep yourself going when you see Harry down the road raising 20 million quid and you're like, well, bugger, I should have done that?
Yeah, I think there were definitely some moments where, 5 years in or something, where I thought, God, maybe I've chosen the most difficult path ever here. Like, tech seems so easy.
Yeah.
Everyone is throwing money at tech so easily. This is so hard. It's physical. Like, physical rollouts could not have been more out of favor than they were a few years ago. Ironically, you've now got a big shift of all of these e-commerce and D2C businesses opening physical stores. I think you have to remind yourself that everything is cyclical.
100%.
2 years ago, every VC in the world was like, grow faster, grow revenue, don't worry about profit, just chase customer numbers, we'll figure out profit later, And then overnight, there's a bit of a sentiment shift and everyone's laying off 10, 20, 30% of their workforce, everyone's on a route to profitability. And this stuff is pretty fickle and pretty cyclical. And I think ultimately, just stay in your own lane, focus on your knitting, as one of my board members likes to say to me at every opportunity. Just stay in your lane, focus on what you're doing, build value, create customers, and the other stuff will figure itself out.
Because there's been some quite clear things that you've put in place over the last 10 or so years to build Grind, but there's another thing that's on the horizon. You've raised 20 odd million quid, going back to that analogy about raising money, but to open up in America. Now, America is a totally different market to the UK in terms of laws and people and trade, just everything.
Yeah.
Massive risk. Do you know much about America?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. Look, I think that it got reported that we raised that money to go to America, whereas the story was we raised that money to grow the business, and that included going to America. Yeah. But people see America and a big number and put it together in a headline. But we certainly are growing the US business for sure.
Yeah.
So we supply Soho House Group globally with coffee. So we have a big partnership with them. For me, they set the bar about hospitality. I'm a huge fan and love the guys from Soho House. And so our coffee is in all of the UK and European and US houses, and our tins of home compostable pods like these here are in all of the hotel rooms. So we have a very deep partnership with them. So we already, before this last round, we already roast coffee daily in Brooklyn and LA, in partnership. We have our own team members there roasting.
So you don't shove it out from the UK,
No,
you do it locally.
It's too bad for the environment as well, like shipping that coffee around. So we already do that. We now have our D2C business live. So there's a US website, we have US subscribers and US people coming onto the sites. We're in a few supermarkets, and we're going to be doing some physical stuff out there as well. But I think we think the US is a massive opportunity.
Huge.
We think there's a huge, obviously, cultural link between us and there. We have this big Soho House presence there. A lot of Soho House's future growth is focused on the US, so that gives us a great kind of springboard to meet their members and get a little bit of brand recognition. But we're not interested in opening 100 coffee shops in the US. That would require £100 million. We are, however, just really enjoying and having a lot of fun just getting our first customers, getting our first US sales, starting to tweak the product for the US, tweak the messaging, introduce other products, different sizes, and starting on the process of discovery. And I think, for me personally, what I've loved so much about the last few years is that I've gone from running and growing this high street business, got it to a point where it kind of made sense, had some scale, have inserted a managing director, amazing guy called Kyle, who funnily enough is ex-Soho House,
is he?
into running that business day to day. And I'm now building the direct to consumer business. So it's been like starting again with two of us, and that business has now got, 40 or 50 people working on it full time. And then you start this new chapter of the US. And I think that's probably where a lot of entrepreneurs probably enjoy that bit the most, and maybe add the most value then. Like I think
the ideation.
There's a reason that all of these big tech businesses eventually install a grown-up professional CEO to run them, right? Because running a big organization, we're obviously on nothing like the scale of that, but the same principles apply. Like running a big organization is a very different skill set than willing something into existence and like creating it from the beginning. And so, I've loved starting the e-commerce business, and we're loving now starting and learning about the international expansion.
In terms of management delegation and that kind of thing, because obviously when you started, you had one restaurant, but actually then you opened a couple of other ones, for instance, because you were bored or it wasn't entertaining you enough, right? You'd have had to have delegated from day one, because you have to have staff behind the bar, right? In terms of plugging in your MD into Grind as we knew it, at what point did you go, actually, I'm going to step back a little bit here. This is my baby, but you can run it. I'm going to go and explore the US or the D2C markets or whatever that might be. Because that in and of itself is a massive risk, just to delegate the business.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've never struggled with, is kind of delegation and the letting go. I'm a control freak in the way that lots of us are control freaks, in that we like to know what's going on. I like to be consulted on key decisions, but I don't feel the need to be in the middle of everything and making it up. And actually, the whole point to me, like when we had one store, I was CEO, finance director, HR director, ops director, I'm an everything director, right? Because there's no one else to do anything. And so you're like, I distinctly remember doing payroll from a laptop on holiday somewhere, because I was on holiday for the first time in ages, but it was Friday and I had to do payroll, and I was sat there tethered to my phone on the laptop manually doing payroll for the 20 staff. And like, to me, that sucks. Like, I don't want to do that. So like, as sooner the better, as soon as we can afford to hire experts, let's put experts into all these things who all are obviously going to do a better job of doing that thing full time, where they're an expert, than I am in 1/10 of my time, and I'm not an expert. So I have no problem with that, really. I think, as CEO, you still have to define, you still have you have an increasingly important, in a lot of ways, role to play in defining culture, thinking about, where do we spend our gold? We've got this pot of gold, where are we going to bet that gold? I think that's super important, and all these other things. But actually running the business day to day, it's like, get experts to do it.
How often did you go with your gut rather than your head?
A lot. I think it's dangerous for lots of people to go on these podcasts and say, just go with your gut, just get on with it. Oh, you don't need university. Like, I think that all that stuff is nonsense, to be honest. I think it's like really overhyped, and I think it's clickbaity. But I think, I think your gut is not this mystical force. Your gut is just your experience of what you've seen, and having the ability to go, look, I realize that on paper this makes sense, but actually I just don't think that's how the world works.
It's where you feel comfortable. It's a safe zone.
And I think I just don't think it's going to turn out like that, because normally you're trying to predict the future in one way or another, right? Like, that's what you're trying to do. Like, you're trying to say, will this site work or not? Will this product work or not? And actually, as CEO, you have to have the ability to absorb all of this information, some of it financial, some of it anecdotal, some of it just from your mates, some of it from people you bump into, and try and form opinions on stuff which doesn't have a right or a wrong answer. It's just a bet at the end of the day. Like, but my gut says, actually, I think this is going to happen, not that. And you have to be able to decide, and then you have to be able to convince others that you're going to be right, and then you have to try and make yourself right retrospectively as well as things go on, which is interesting.
That is difficult. And in terms of kind of how your life is changing, it's changed massively over the last literally 8 weeks, because you've had a little one. So congratulations with that. In terms of how that's changed your life as a business owner, because you can manage it up until this point by going, oh, I'm not going to go to that meeting, I'm going to go and do this, this and this.
Yeah.
You've got a little one now, so you're up 24 hours a day pretty much, maybe 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
Do you still focus as heavily on the business, or has that changed your parameters slightly and you're now very much focused on the family?
Well, yeah, so I've actually got two. So I've got an 18-month-year-old and an 18-month-year-old, 18-month-old and a 6-week-old. And yeah, look, I mean, everything from the day of the first lockdown, really, my life changed an extraordinary amount. Like I've moved house, so I left Shoreditch after 12 years and moved 20 minutes out into a kind of a grown-up house. Had one baby, had another baby, developed a D2C business, did a big raise. You know, life has changed an awful lot. I think
for the better though, and well done.
Yeah, for the better. Yeah, it's been amazing. I think. Do you know what? Cassandra Stavru, who founded Proper, the popcorn brand, who's amazing business, amazing. She's an amazing person. She had a baby at a similar time to me, and she said she described it as the baby just turning down the volume on everything else from like a 10 to an 8. Yeah. And that to me, like I've never been able to better that analogy in terms of, you know, previously you wake up and the first thing in your head is, right, what am I doing today? Let me check, you know, quickly get my phone, check yesterday's numbers, check this, you know, it's just straight away. It's like you're obsessed with the business, and that's the first thing you think about. It's the last thing you think about. Now, you know, the first thing I do when I wake up is check the monitor for the baby in the next room. Like, is she okay? Like, are they okay? Like, okay, what do they need? Okay, they need to be fed, or, you know, whatever, all the other parent stuff. And like, that suddenly goes in at number one on your priority list. And actually, it's really nice to turn down the volume on everything else a little bit, and it gives you great perspective as well. But it's definitely challenging to grow a business alongside doing that, just because all of these things take a lot of time, and you only have so many hours in the day, right? So I think, I think probably I probably do work fewer hours now than I used to, but equally it's different, and because we're a bigger organization, there's less requirement of me to do lots of things.
I was going to say,
and more requirement on me to meet with the team and guide the teams and make the bigger decisions. And you know, your impact can still be huge in the decisions you make and the kind of the course that you set. So increasingly now I do like one-to-ones with 20 or 30 people every quarter, and we do big quarterly business reviews where me and some of the other senior guys will present the business to the whole business to tell them what's going on and what we need to focus on. So it changes.
Yeah. And did you learn all of this just by doing, or did you get told by your SLT, right, we need to be doing QBRs, for instance?
I think you look at what other people are doing, you read books, you pick up ideas. You know, I'm a big business book reader. I think they're all, you know, you read people's autobiographies, or you read, you know, the Netflix one or the Disney CEO, or you read this, and they're very entertaining. You know, the Elon Musk one, whatever. Yeah, they're entertaining, and there's a lot of fluff in them. But there's normally a few things where you go, oh, that's really clever, and you just borrow other people's ideas, right? And you just borrow, and you figure out what's right for your culture and your organization.
So in terms, I suppose, of what the pandemic did for you guys and the R&D that you put into the compostable coffee pods, essentially, you're no longer really a high street restaurant or a high street coffee shop, essentially. It's all mainly online, right?
Yeah, which has been a huge pivot. You know, you see lots of these D2C businesses grew big online businesses, then opened physical. We've kind of done it the other way around, in that we opened the physical, but we are now primarily a coffee at home business. You know, we just released our new home compostable pods, so they're the first in the UK to be certified home compostable rather than industrially compostable. And this is all now about leading a movement for us to become the world's most sustainable coffee brand, because the big problem with pods is that they are aluminium, and people naturally think, hold on, aluminium's okay, right? Like Coke cans, they can be infinitely recycled, but that's not the case with pods. And 20% of every new pod that is made has to be made with freshly mined aluminium. And mining that aluminium is super energy intensive, toxic, potentially carcinogenic. Like, it's really not nice.
No.
And the problem is that everyone has these little aluminium capsules in their kitchen, but less than 1 in 3 actually get recycled. So, 29,000 pods go into landfill every single minute, which is insane. 29,000 a minute. So, we thought if we were going to do these capsules, that there has to be a better way. So ours you can compost at home. literally in your back garden or in like a Boshi bin or a similar thing. They can go in the food waste bin and they disappear faster than grass cutting. So they decompose faster than grass cuttings, which is amazing. And actually they're certified climate neutral. We think it is the most sustainable way to make coffee at home, even more so than loose methods like beans and cafetières, because the amount of coffee you use is so precise that you're not wasting coffee. And actually the growing, roasting, shipping, processing of coffee is quite carbon intensive as well. So if you can be really accurate with the amount of coffee that you use inside a pod, not waste any, and then have it packaged in really amazing materials, that actually has the lowest carbon footprint of any way of making a high quality cup of coffee. So that's the business now, you know, and we are looking to eat the lunch of those big companies who are, you know, have many billions of revenue every year. And we think it's a massive opportunity.
And are too slow to adopt such a unique approach.
And are not incentivized to do so because they're having too nice a time making billions and billions and billions of profit.
Well,
you know, Nestle
shareholders, haven't they?
Yeah, Nestle, who own Nespresso, they do $8 or $10 billion a year of these pods, and they're making billions of profit. And they, you know.
Do you think that's wrong though? Do you think they should have to, by law, be focused on R&D in that product?
Yeah, absolutely. I think not just focusing on them, but like, you know, you never know quite what to believe, but certainly a huge portion of the world's carbon is produced by a relatively low number of big companies. You know, some shocking proportion is produced by 100 companies around the world. And I think, you know, to me, the Nestle and Nespresso thing would be a classic version of pushing the problem onto the customer by saying, well, we've given you an envelope to recycle with, and we have things in our stores, you can bring them back. But like, is that really the point?
Yeah.
Like, how about we just stop producing this stuff in the first place and stop incentivizing people to have it at home by giving them cheap machines and all that kind of stuff, and actually fix the problem at its root source. So, you know, we would like to see everyone switch to home compostable pods. You know, I think that would be the best thing ever for my business personally, because the mass adoption of pods would be great, of compostability would be good for us, because we've already set our stall out about compostable. So we would benefit as everyone else switched anyway, and the world would benefit as well. And I think, you know, these big corporate organizations need to take more responsibility for this stuff.
I wouldn't even call it early adoption, I'd call it early disruption to a certain extent. And actually looking at how your business was built over time in terms of only working with the high-end retailers or only working with, you know, Soho House, for instance, you know, the creme de la creme. In terms of retail online, do you only sell through certain areas? You're not going to sell on Amazon, for instance, or you're not going to sell on certain websites because you want to sell exclusively?
Yeah, so we do sell on Amazon because we think Amazon is a highly convenient channel for people, obviously.
For mass adoption.
But then, yeah, exactly. So we do sell on Amazon because people just want to buy stuff on Amazon. But we, you know, the vast majority of sales are on subscription on our own website. And then there's a couple of other places you can buy it, Ocado being one of them. And then you can buy the physical tins in Selfridges and places like that. But no, we want to keep that very narrow because we want to control the customer experience. And we want to have a relationship with our customers. And, you know, the value can come from not just that product, but from you then subscribing and from us being able to send you free samples every now and again, and us being able to send you videos showing how to get the best from your coffee at home, and building a relationship over time. Like, we have our own espresso machine. Increasingly, our customers buy those, and if they need to, they can send them back to us for repair. And yeah, we want people to be with us drinking our coffee at home for 20 years. And you build that. I think you build that relationship directly with the customer by knowing your customer, not by selling it through Tesco's and Sainsbury's and wherever else, and just being interchangeable for whatever the next one is with a red sticker on it saying 50% off.
So going back to kind of books and inspiration that you kind of pick up on, what's one of the best books that you've read that's kind of helped you through your journey?
I think that there's two that spring to mind, actually, both about Netflix. So there's one called That Will Never Work, which is by the guy, I can't remember his name, who originally founded Netflix, and it was his idea, and he was a bit of like a wacky inventor, and he had loads of different business ideas, and then suddenly he came up with this. And then you've got No Rules by Reed Hastings, who was involved from day one, but later became CEO and really grew it into the mega corporation it is today. And I think seeing the story from both of those perspectives is amazing, and also hearing about how Netflix pioneered so much of the cultural stuff that we now see everywhere, like unlimited paid time off, and this very hands-off management style. I think they're, you have to take it all with a pinch of salt always, but they're two that I think are really worth reading.
In terms of buying Netflix on Amazon, where can you buy Grind?
So you can buy Grind on our website, you can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it in our stores, you can buy it on Ocado, you can buy it lots of places now.
Anywhere.
Not anywhere, premium retailers only.
There you go. You've done an amazing job on making it valuable, but also building a brand which could be and will be the world's first eco-friendly coffee business.
Thank you.
David,
We're trying.
You're getting there.
Yeah, we're trying.
Cheers, dude.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not listen to a few more and click subscribe? This podcast was produced by Pinpoint Media, and I'm Oliver Bruce. I hope we can speak again soon. Take care.